Hi everybody, I'm Corey from My Life in Gaming. Before we start, how many people in this room are familiar with our RGB Masterclass series? Okay, that's pretty crazy. The way that we kind of set this up is we have an intro video, and then it's pretty much going to be Q&A. So feel free to ask us anything you want about it.
And I'm Try. I'm the other person on My Life in Gaming. And yeah, the intro video is basically just, some people here, maybe you're just interested in getting better quality out of retro consoles, but you don't really know what this is all about. So this is just a simple video that's sort of to put everyone on sort of a level ground to begin with, and hopefully we'll be able to play it at some point in the panel, but we might just go ahead and get started. And over here, we've got the two guys from HD Retrovision, Nick Mueller and Steve Kulov, and they make up what's a team of what I would say, 8 to 10 people. I mean, when we do the RGB episodes on our channel, we send these to people who, we can't do modifications, we can't wire cables, like we aren't super technical in an electrical sense, but we can appreciate the result, and we've done the work to understand what it takes to get that result, and we believe that anyone should be able to enjoy this just like we have. So, but we think we know what we're doing, but we always send it off to smarter, more technical people like these guys and say, okay, help us fact check our scripts, give us ideas for other things that we should look into, make sure that we said this in the right way, and the series would not be what it is without people like them, the guy from RetroRGB.com, and so many others who help us make sure this information is correct. And if you guys want to say anything?
No, I'm Steve. I'm an electrical engineer, and so I help try out when he sends me the scripts, like if something is a little inaccurate, or like is this explained the correct way. I try to jot down some notes, and yeah, I like helping out with stuff like that. So
yeah, we're actually just fans of them,
yeah,
as big as any of you guys. So
yeah,
they kind of undersell themselves a bit. We have email chains that go back and forth that get pretty technical, and they know what they're talking about. So.
Well, I mean, we understand it well enough that we can interpret what they're saying and maybe put it in more of a, and I don't know, Steve's a bit of a grammar fiend too, so
missing comma here.
But I formatted it.
Whatever, you know what?
Want to get up and look at it real quick before
You want to
I don't know.
All right.
Sure, I'll look at it. Y'all keep talking.
All right. We had a lot of people saying that they wanted to see this on our channel, so we're doing our best to record it. We did a version of this panel at Too Many Games in June, and didn't really go super smooth. It's just we had more of a presentation, but people really just wanted to ask questions. Okay. Looks like everything is fine. So do we want to just
do questions? Or
no? Let's play the video. Let's play the video, and we're gonna just crank in the audio here. I'm gonna put the.
Can we get 2 microphones on this sucker?
Yeah.
I used to do that. That's how I got my game soundtracks, as a 13, 14-year-old. Those were good times, and I feel like that kind of stuff kind of naturally leads into this sort of stupid thing that we do now. So it's crazy.
All right, you want to go ahead and play it?
Yeah. Everyone be quiet and listen.
I've never watched anything I've ever done in front of people before.
Welcome to the RGB Masterclass. This is the starting point for your journey into getting the best picture quality from your retro consoles. Believe it or not, these old systems are capable of some pretty crazy stuff, and a lot of them support a higher level of video quality than you may have realized. Until just a few years ago, we thought that the Sega Genesis couldn't do any better than blurry composite video, and that S-Video was the pinnacle for the SNES. Would you have imagined that it's possible to get a sharper and more accurate image from the original hardware than through retro downloads on HD systems like the PS3 or Nintendo's Virtual Console service? Do you wish that your NES games could look as clear as the label art?
Whether you want to use your sleek HD TV or you're a die-hard CRT fan, whether you love the pixelated emulator look or you gotta have scan lines, you might be surprised by what real retro consoles can do with the right cables and hardware. RGB is a color space in which red, green, and blue define all the colors in an image. This is different from the component video cables that you might be used to seeing. But it just so happens that a great number of retro consoles are actually equipped to output RGB video. Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, Neo Geo, PlayStation, and more. Analog RGB is an extremely high quality signal that provides an amazing image for retro consoles. While North American consumer televisions were never equipped to handle this type of RGB, Europe, Japan, and other regions have RGB-capable connectors like SCART.
To display RGB, we can use professional video monitors, high-quality, long-lasting CRTs that were used in TV production and other fields, or video scalers designed to display low-resolution content and high quality on your HD TV, such as the XRGB Mini, also known as the FrameMeister. While all HD TVs scale standard definition video to fit their higher resolution screens, the processing is poorly optimized for retro games, resulting in an image worse than you probably remember, as well as input lag, a noticeable delay from when you press a button until when you see a reaction on the screen. CRTs have no inherent input lag, and well-designed external scalers can significantly minimize it. For many people, the scanline look is essential to their retro experience, and many video scalers also offer this option. While some consoles don't have native RGB capabilities, such as the NES, TurboGrafx, and N64, they can be modified for it, resulting in an image well beyond what you saw as a kid. And more recently, advanced HDMI mods have been developed, which can address specific quirks of the hardware, such as the N64's infamous blur.
But it's not all about getting the best or what we think is the best. The goal of the RGB Masterclass is to equip you with an understanding of all of the possibilities so that you can decide what works best for you and your setup. Details on how scalers and CRTs work, specifics on each console, special topics, and new developments. So much of the conversation surrounding retro console video quality is extremely technical, and we had an incredibly difficult time coming to grips with all of the different factors. You don't have to know how to solder or build your own cables. Retro gaming and RGB is something that anyone should be able to enjoy. So we strive to make the RGB Masterclass the resource that we wish had been available when we were getting into all this. We're still learning and researching thoroughly with every episode, collaborating with respected experts in the retro gaming community who understand this stuff on a far more technical level than we ever could.
You'll find a playlist for the RGB Masterclass on our YouTube page. You should also keep in mind other resources like RetroRGB.com, VideoGamePerfection.com, and Hazard City. So now that everyone gets the basics of what this is all about, let's talk retro console video quality. Who's got some questions?
That sort of worked.
Another name for the RGB Masterclass is close-ups of hands plugging things in.
With added sound effects.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes we're lazy on sound effects, but we're trying to get better. They do make it more fun. But yeah, it's funny, like, and Steve compliments us all the time on our skills at plugging things into systems, and I think he's wrong because it takes like a million takes, like that shot of the back of the HDMI N64, like
It's like a 5-minute video if you're trying to get it to plug in.
it's so hard. Like, I mean, because when you're trying to plug something in normally you fiddle with it a little bit, but you don't think about it. But when you're trying to make a video shot, you don't want it to look like stupid. So like you're trying to plug it in like a million times, and it's, you got to get to line up exactly right. And then sometimes you're surprised when it actually goes in. It's dumb. But anyway, we kind of just wanted to turn this into more or less just Q&A and discussion. And if there's something a little beyond what we know and understand, these guys know the electronics of how these systems are outputting the signal. So, let's just talk.
All right.
Yeah.
Right back over here in the hat.
Oh, hi.
Hey.
I have a quick question. I was looking at the FrameMeister before, but I have sort of an AV switch box at home that all relies on composite at the moment. I have 5 systems go from one composite box to another, and then the remaining composites jump into a component switch box, and the component connection goes to TV. Question: if I put the component connection directly into the FrameMeister, will the switch box still function, or can it only support one system?
If you're going with the switch box into the FrameMeister, you can switch in between them.
Okay, so it wouldn't like be able to be original.
No, I would get a powered one if you can.
Okay.
I always try to get powered. It's fine with composite stuff, but with component, I would definitely get a powered one.
Yeah, we both.
Switch box is powered to be good to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's generally advised. That reduces the possibility of signal quality loss. We both use a switcher by Impact Acoustics that has 6 component inputs, 2 component outputs, and I've never done like an A/B switch test to see if there's like a difference, but it looks. I haven't noticed any noticeable noise introduced by that. And there's the FrameMeister has what's called a D-terminal input, which is it's essentially what Japan uses more commonly than what we know as component, but it's the same type of signal, YPBPR, and you can buy in places like Solaris Japan, where we bought our FrameMeister. They sell it with an adapter that goes D-terminal to component, and you just take all your component sources into that. So yeah, using a switcher is totally fine.
Right here in front here.
Yeah, so the Dreamcast has the VGA box where you could plug in like the computer monitor, the blue thing, and I'm lucky enough I have an older plasma that has that type of connection, but I noticed a lot of the newer HD TVs don't have that anymore. So I was wondering if there was like any kind of way to get that high quality HD picture out of the Dreamcast on a newer TV. Like, are there converters from to HDMI?
Well, we're working on something that will give you component video out of the Dreamcast, and you'll be able to select it to the 480p mode, so you'll get that full VGA quality, but it'll be through the component jacks. That's just one option that is hopefully soon we'll be able to come up with that.
Yeah, to give some background on that, we're the company that's doing component cables for Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, and Dreamcast is kind of our next target for cables, and we want to be able to reuse a lot of what we've already done for the first 2.
The other thing with components, I noticed that they're getting phased out a lot too in the newer TVs. So, is there a good component HDMI solution?
The
FrameMeister, I guess, but
right now.
actually,
yeah.
we're hoping it might be. We were hoping we could do it in March. It might be delayed a bit, but there's some exciting options coming up in terms of FrameMeister alternatives, and we're hoping to, in the coming months, feature some that might be kind of crappy, but some that might actually be pretty solid alternatives that might be at least a little bit less expensive.
Yeah. The big. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Also, component probably isn't phased out yet. What TV manufacturers have been doing, they put like a headphone style jack on the back, so it doesn't look like it's there, but you either have to buy an adapter or it comes with an adapter that breaks out that into component and AV connections. I don't know if I've seen something marketed as a TV yet that doesn't have any component. They probably just give you one.
Yeah,
but,
I haven't seen anything like that either. But just to go back specifically to Dreamcast, do you have a FrameMeister?
Yeah.
Or we both use a box called the Toro box, Toro, and it's like what, $80? I mean, it's a little expensive, but
It's like a German device.
no, it's from Hungary.
Oh, right.
And that's the only thing I've ever bought from Hungary. It was kind of interesting to receive, but it has a SCART output and a VGA output, so you can, just like a traditional Dreamcast X box, I don't know what I'm saying, VGA box, you can plug it into, you know, the VGA input on your TV. And what's really those were designed at a time where, you know, we were using VGA CRT computer monitors, and I'd never actually tried my Dreamcast hooked up to one of those, and I just happened to have one that I used as a prop like a year and a half ago in a video that was supposed to look like an old computer. And I plugged up the Dreamcast from the Toro box to that, and it looks beautiful. So, like, that's really what it's meant for. So, like, if you can get your hands on a CRT VGA monitor, that's really worthwhile. But the SCART output on the Toro box actually outputs in 480p. Which will go to the FrameMeister, which is significant because if you plug a official or any kind of cable that is a RGB SCART cable into a Dreamcast, it actually won't support 480p through that connection, but that's not a limitation of SCART itself. So you can get 480p into the FrameMeister or a 480p capable CRT in that fashion.
Yeah, as long as the device you're connecting it to can support that.
This gentleman right here.
Yeah, I started off with an XRG 2 Plus, and now I have a 2 and a 3. And my setup, I'm fine. I don't need a FrameMeister. I want one just because it's in my nature to want something new. But I guess the easiest way to ask my question is, let's say I've got a 480p monitor, and I have a FrameMeister too. So I set the FrameMeister, the output 480p. Is its video quality, is it pretty good in 480p? Because I've heard it's actually kind of blurry.
480p definitely struggles a little bit. It's
well,
one of the
well,
lesser.
that's.
720 is like its sweet spot.
But is this someone hooking up the FrameMeister 480p to a 480p native display? They okay. Yeah, I don't. Because we usually hook it up to like 1080p displays.
Right,
We just
right,
take the
that's usually what we
480p
do.
and to
Right,
convert it
like-
to 1080p.
You just recently did that.
Right. So, if I'm understanding your question correctly, I don't really see any benefit to making the FrameMeister output 480p, because if you were using 480p or 240p or 480i sources, well, I mean, maybe you're trying to de-interlace 480i to go to a PVM.
Last generation, it was the last CRT HD TV that Sony made. Like the Super 5 and all that.
The XBR 960 is that? Yeah. Okay. I have that too. I have that too. That's not 480p native.
Well, no, it supports 480p native.
Right, but it doesn't draw 480 lines. It always draws 1080i.
Well, I'm using XRGB3 to it. The XRGB3 in line double note is just going to put out 480p.
Yeah.
And it supports 480p native.
It's a little more complicated than that.
It's a multi-sync monitor.
That's what I thought too.
It does 480p and does 1080i.
Right.
Upscales 720 to 1080.
But it still draws 1080 lines. It's a weird. It's complicated. There's lots of forums on this stuff, and it's only drawing 1080i, but like the motor drive on the CRT like changes when you have either 480p or 1080i. It's really goofy. I don't know all the details.
I have a BBM.
Yeah.
And it supports everything from 240 to 1080i.
Yeah.
Right.
Natively.
Right.
Natively.
Right.
Well, let's just say I hooked up to that.
Okay.
FrameMeister up to that.
But does the BVM have like an HDMI input? Because I think the FrameMeister only outputs HDMI.
Right, it only does it. HDMI.
Yeah.
It only does HDMI.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if it's all that worth it if you're ultimately hooking up to CRTs, and especially in the case of HD CRTs. I personally haven't tried using the FrameMeister. I do have an HD CRT. I don't know if it's the same model number because I'm kind of bad on model numbers, but I've got 36-inch HD Sony CRT, and I'm actually planning to get rid of it because knowing what I know now about how retro console images are drawn, you know, it doesn't treat the image in the way that I would want it to. You know, even a good standard definition CRT provides a more true look. And if you have a BVM, I mean, I would say that, I mean, I could make, you know, I've never experimented, but I could see there maybe being some benefit to de-interlacing 480i and outputting it to a 480p capable BVM.
The only reason that I really, XRV3 does a crappy job with 480i. I don't like the way it looks. I hate 480i as a format.
Yeah, me too. I wish it never, I wish that generation never forced it on us.
I wish the DS2 is 480p and I would be okay.
I agree completely.
So I'm kind of stuck in a situation where I need to get a good de-interlacer.
You want good de-interlacer. I mean, I think, in my opinion, it's a pretty darn good de-interlacer. So if you, when people say that 480p is not the FrameMeister strong suit, generally they're referring to processing 480p and upscaling it to other resolutions.
Yeah.
I haven't tried it extensively in 480p, but I would suspect if all you want to do is de-interlace 480i into 480p, I suspect it would probably be pretty good, but it's not something we, or at least I have tested.
Right. I haven't really either.
And there's one other thing about the FrameMeister, the Neo Geo, the MBS, runs a slightly quirky frame rate. And I've heard it can cause stuttering. I didn't know how the FrameMeister how it handles that. It's like 59 point something or another refresh rate for the MBS. The Neo Geo, the clock speed is actually like 60.
Oh, wow.
I haven't tried it, but I know that the FrameMeister trips up on the 480i from Sega Genesis, which is like 59.86
Right, and like
or something.
like with,
and
Sonic-
that sounds
Sonic
kind of
2.
close, so I don't know for sure. I haven't tried it.
I mean, I just got a consoleized MBS, so I haven't really had a chance to to try it out. Just for a few minutes. We were too busy like putting these videos and stuff and everything together. I thought it looked pretty good. I mean, I played Ironclad on it and thought it looked. I didn't really notice it.
That pretty much, I mean, I would imagine you probably would have seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I played it mostly on my PVM, but I was, you know, just like making sure everything works.
Generally speaking, on the FrameMeister, from what I've learned, horizontal scaling isn't really an issue. Vertical could be, but horizontal, it interpolates the horizontal so it looks both sharp, but it doesn't have to be an integer scale. Though that might be getting a little bit away from what you're talking about. I don't know. I mean, because it's more of a refresh thing,
Yeah.
and I don't know anything about the Neo Geo.
There's a Neo Geo episode coming up in the next couple months, so we'll definitely.
He's the one doing all the research on that.
Yeah.
I know that XRGB3 bullet and down with MBS on a flat panel and LCD or plasma, there's issues with that. But I heard the FrameMeister tweaked that, and people aren't having the issue of it.
It's possible.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't really used a.
Yeah, I mean, you got on this train a lot sooner than we did, because you know we have not had an opportunity to use an XRGB 2 or 3. So you know we've got FrameMeister experience, and we're working on testing a few other things, like we said, for a soon forthcoming FrameMeister alternatives episode, which I'll just go ahead and say keep an eye out for a thing called the open source scan converter. I don't know for sure if it will be something that will be helpful for your situation. And again, if you're talking connecting to a CRT, you're ultimately going to have to be converting that HDMI to, so I don't know if it's really the route you want to go through, but it does do a good job with 480i in my opinion.
I think so too.
Right here.
But yeah, original Xbox video output. You guys have any say on what's the best? I guess my situation is I don't have a FrameMeister. I use PDMs and DVMs, and I'm curious what's the best.
If you're-
I've heard VGA, I've heard RGB, and I've heard component.
I use component and just do everything 480p on it, and I think it looks great. If your PVM or BVM supports 480p, I think it looks fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we plan to, we haven't done Xbox yet, and we haven't like super thoroughly researched it. I
Right.
mean, we know there are options that may be a little more obscure, but I'm personally really happy with, I mean, I'm pretty new to the original Xbox myself, but I did a video on Grab by the Ghoulies, and someone commented, "This is the best looking game capture I've ever seen in my life." And I don't know, I didn't think it was anything special, but that was using like $8 generic brand component cables from Amazon. So like, component does pretty good. I mean, the thing you have to keep in mind, and this is going to be a point that we're making in our upcoming GameCube video, when it comes to 480p, I think you have to keep your expectations modest. You know, it's you know, you've got that good, crisp, retro 240p pixelated look from earlier generations, and then you get HD starting with the Xbox 360 and PS3. The Xbox, PS2, GameCube hit just such a weird generation because it's not quite HD, and it looks like it could be HD, and that's why there's so many HD remakes, but it's in between those, and it looks weird to us these days. But you know,
we talk about it quite a bit in the upcoming GameCube episode.
Yeah.
Follow-up question, do you guys know much about downscaling or downscalers for, let's say, the 360 to 480?
I've never really experimented.
Doesn't the 360 support?
Right, it's
or
480p.
to 240p? Or
Yeah, I'm sorry, to 240p.
okay.
Like if you wanted to like play it with scan lines on a PVM or something like that. Yeah. I mean, it sounds interesting.
Cool, yeah.
Like Corey's looking into options for down converting like a PC to run on a PVM in 240p, and it's a complicated process with obscure components, and it's not easy. But as far as downscalers, like there are devices that do it, but to be honest, we just haven't had a chance to use any of them.
There's a machine called a Extron Moto Show, and it'll take VGA and it'll put it out, output it to 240p.
Yeah. It's not that expensive either. Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about that today, actually.
That was way back before, like, you had, like, an SLT 3000, where it's just like, just get it with 480p, you don't have to worry about it anymore. I mean, I had it, but it's just kind of ridiculous. I had this going to XRGB 3 that was going to, another VGA component. There's just too much just for a handful of games.
Yeah.
It worked.
So are you just like throwing away every other line then completely when you do something like
Yeah,
that?
I guess, like, I mean, I think, was it you? No, I think it was Artemio who made the point in the GameCube video. I don't know how much I want to spoil. Anyway,
you can say it.
okay,
Yeah,
I'll say it. So I've had a chance to use an HDMI-equipped GameCube, and there is an option to add scan lines to it, which there's a few like games like the Zelda Collector's Edition or the Mega Man X Collection or something, you know, those retro games, but you put scan lines on like Super Mario Sunshine or something, and you're effectively covering up half of the resolution every other line, and it's just not something that, in my opinion, defines the look of the games of, you know, the 480i, 480p generation. It's interesting, and, you know, scan lines can be fun, but it's, I don't think, really appropriate for a system that is trying to do 480p. But you know, it can be an interesting look. But you're deleting half the resolution by adding scan lines.
Right over here.
What can I do to make the Sega Saturn not suck?
In terms of like video. Well, I mean, there's S-video cables available. I think that it's Stone Age Gamer sells S-video cables, and you know, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the challenge. I mean, I'm new to the Sega Saturn as well, but I started off with an S-video cable, and I'm sorry, it's so awkward. I'm like trying to look at you, but I'm also trying to lean toward the mic. The nice thing about Sega Saturn is it natively supports RGB. So if you have a device that will take RGB, or that's something that you're interested in getting into, which is, you know, kind of the topic of the whole thing.
If you wanted to make it look good on your HDTV without really getting an upscale or anything, you could get like a SCART cable and then a SCART to component cable. And
Yeah, I mean, there's some good options like that.
yeah,
And
it depends on how well your TV handles 240p. We found that Samsungs are like the best ones at handling 240p. Like they see it correctly. Some TVs won't even do anything with 240p.
yeah, but yeah, like the Dreamcast, like there's some sync issues that we need to investigate, but generally speaking, the Saturn, I say Genesis, Saturn is a pretty straightforward situation because it all models natively support RGB. Do you want to add anything to that?
There are some sync problems with I think multi-region stuff. So I think PAL might not have like a C-Sync line for it.
Right.
But we're looking into making like these adapters for these Genesis component cables that we make that would allow you to use that cable with a Sega Saturn. But again, you would need the 240p support on your TV for the games that use the 240p. So.
Yeah, and I can vouch that I used a PlayStation version of that same concept. You know, these guys are making Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis native cables for component to convert the RGB to component. They sent me a converter for the Sega Genesis cable that goes to PlayStation, and it's an awesome conversion. So I imagine the Saturn is going to be pretty good as well.
Well, it's something we're looking into right now, so it's not 100%.
It's a really good way to streamline the entire process for people.
Yeah. It's something we discovered because it's a side effect of making the Super Nintendo circuit really robust to work multi-region, work like all these different ways. Like it's very compatible, and the side effect of that was it's able to work with the type of signals coming out of these other consoles as well. So,
Green shirt.
I've got an NES, but straight to the back, component composite combo port from Samsung, and it's like 90% perfect, but a lot of the scan lines are just in the wrong place, sticking like randomly.
So is this an HD TV?
Yes, it's like brand example.
And when you say scan lines, you're not talking about like the alternating black and white thing. You're just talking like certain. You're just talking certain lines of the video are out of place. Sometimes we've heard that the combo port connections on certain TVs can be kind of funky. And I mean, you guys have tested a lot more HD TVs for that kind of compatibility.
I don't know if it's the combo port as much because Samsung, to detect what you got in there, it has switches inside the PR and the PB jacks. Well, just the PB jack. When you plug something in there, that it unlocks the option for you to select component. If nothing's in there, it assumes you have, if you have something plugged in the combo jack, that it's composite. But I think it's, I've stumbled across Samsungs that just on composite with old game systems acts really goofy. I don't know why.
Yeah,
I've seen it.
You know, kind of a related tangent to that, on our PlayStation video, we got a lot of comments recently about people saying, wait a second, I thought you couldn't play PlayStation 1 games on a PlayStation 2 when using component cables. And that's not true, but it's a common misconception because TV manufacturers sometimes design their ports in stupid ways, and maybe it will accept 240p over the composite input, but it won't accept 240p over the component input.
I've seen something like even weirder where a Panasonic Plasma would accept a 240p over its composite and its component, but when you're on channel 3 on the RF connection, it doesn't like it at all. So I've seen weird things across all kinds of TVs.
Yeah, so the bottom line, I guess, is HD TVs, people, you know, it's sad, but TV manufacturers don't think about retro consoles when they're making this stuff, and it's depressing, but you know, maybe one day you guys will be making HD TVs, and you know we can rest easy. But anyway, yeah, guy in the back, plaid shirt.
Hey, yeah, so I don't want to be the asshole in the room, but what's your opinion on ROMs, I guess, in general?
I don't have any problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of actually both sort of have a little different personal feeling on it, I think. Like,
yeah, I mean,
because like to me, at least, like I feel like I totally respect all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I respect
Yeah.
on my monitor, where, you know, maybe I have to make a few tweaks, but it'll play well, you know? So I guess that's my question to you, is what's your general opinion on?
I generally have no problem with them. I kind of went through a period where they just, like, when you have everything available to you at one time, they feel so much more disposable. Like, I'm just going to play this game for 5 minutes till I get sick of it.
I understand, yeah.
And you know, for me, I've always wanted to play the, you know, the real actual cartridge, and I prefer to play it on original hardware. You know, I know there's kind of some controversy surrounding the Retron 5, but the thing I like about the Retron 5 is that you can use, I mean, I know it's not playing the cart, but you use the cart, and I just like to use the cart because it makes me feel like, you know, it's something I own and I spent money on it, so therefore I take it seriously. I don't play for, like he says, 5 minutes and move on to the next game because I've got access to everything. You know, Corey,
It still has that feel, though. You're grabbing the cart off your shelf and you're plugging
yeah.
it
Now,
into the...
you know, at the end of the day, I mean, whatever works for you that makes you enjoy the game, I guess is what's important. Like Corey, for example, enjoys flash carts like EverDrive, but you only use them really just to like capture footage, and we like to use the original hardware when possible. So that is a way to let you use original hardware on
To play the game.
to play a game that you may not own. But for example, you always say, but I can't take it seriously unless it's a game that I own. I put the cartridge in my system, but it's a convenient way to get footage
If
for
I just need
something.
to get- yeah,
if you
I
just
guess
need to
I
get
like
footage of a game that you don't own, but if you're going to really play it seriously, then you know you got to have the card. But you know, again, you know, different perspective for different people, but.
There's also games that are just not practical for people to buy anymore because of the cost.
Exactly. Well, that's my angle, is that, like, some things are just so expensive.
Yeah.
Right.
Or just, like, you just cannot afford that.
Yeah, I
To do, you know?
see, and that's like,
If you want to review it, or if you want to play it, just end up playing it.
absolutely,
And,
absolutely.
and I think it's.
Or something, you know?
I think it's
Right.
just, you know, we get comments on every video, like, and there's a certain group of people that are just so confused, like, why aren't people just playing on emulators? I don't get. But for the most part, the people who watch our videos get it. They understand why we want to play on the original console and why we want to use the real cart and get the signal from the actual console, even if it requires a few modifications to the console at times. But it's just, you know, it's going to be a different audience. There's going to be an audience that's totally okay with emulation and ROMs, and there's going to be another audience that wants the real deal, and, you know, it's whatever. We aren't going to get mad at one group or the other, but a lot of people do sort of get our
That's
perspective.
what's awesome. There's so many options to play
Yeah,
these
yeah,
things.
and you know,
and
like
whatever suits you better.
Corey likes repros, and I like to get the Japanese cart and put it in a Retron 5 and apply the translation patch instead. And so for me, if I had to make a compromise, I would compromise the choice of system that I'm playing it on over whether I'm using the actual cartridge. Corey would rather play it on the actual system, and the cartridge is secondary.
right. This gentleman right here.
Yeah, now what do you know about 3DO's video output, like the best way to hook that?
Well, it can be modified for RGB, but what the cool thing about 3DO is it has like built-in S-video and composite. So I know that it can be modified. What?
It was cool back in the day, like, because having those proprietary jacks, I mean, if you lose the cable, you're golden. But, like,
Yes.
nowadays, like, I want the proprietary jack because I know it has RGB
One of the
on
few good
it.
things about
Yeah.
the 3DO.
Yeah, and that, you know,
That's
that's
kind of backfired.
yeah, it's funny because I did used to think when I saw systems like the old PlayStations that had those jacks on, it's like, ooh, that's cool. I wish every system had and I didn't have to get these cables. But those proprietary jacks do give you access to so many more signals, so many more possibilities for how it's wired up that, you know, at the end of the day, the proprietary jack is kind of your friend.
Yeah. Right here.
Hey, I had a question. I had a hard time understanding the difference between SCART and JB21. Like, when you guys covered
You're really good at this.
Yeah, so they look exactly the same. And now, I personally have never mixed them up, but I am told that it is bad to mix them up because the pins, there's 21 pins, am I right, 21 pin. I mean, it's called a 21 pin connector. I haven't actually counted the pins, but I assume it is, in fact, a 21 pin connector. The signal at the console, you know, you've got the different bits of the signal coming out of the same ports, the same parts of the port, but on the other end of the cable, the SCART end, on SCART, those signals are going out certain pins. On JP21, they're going out different pins. And because there is voltage involved, it is bad to, for example, put a SCART plug into a device that is expecting JP21 or vice versa, because you can, some people tell me I don't know how, if it's like, if you do that, your thing is dead.
When I first, well, no,
If I draw out the diagrams, we could probably get to an answer. I've never done it before.
I've never screwed it up. You know, in fact,
I screwed it up once. When I first got my FrameMeister, it comes with a JP21 input, and I got a SCART cable. Like it was when I was still kind of figuring everything out, and nothing worked, and I couldn't figure out why. But
it didn't break anything. Yeah, I mean, but people tell you to be careful. I wouldn't risk it.
Yeah.
Basically the same cable.
It's the different pinout.
Right.
It's a different pinout.
It's not going to give you any result at all, and supposedly there can be some potential harm to your equipment if you confuse them. But the biggest thing to keep in mind, if you want to use SCART, we use SCART because it's just kind of easier to get a hold of the cables.
Yeah.
But the FrameMeister comes with a JP21 adapter for the RGB port. So you want to go to, we like a seller on eBay called Retro Console Accessories.
She goes on vacation like every few days.
I just started watching your video.
Yeah. Oh.
I actually came here just for that.
Awesome.
But the first thing I did was every time I watched one, I clicked, oh, let me go to that website.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crap, they don't make it anymore.
Last time I bought something from Retro Console Accessories, you know, you can send a message and say, you know, hey, you know, can you do a special request? Like, for example, I wanted a PlayStation cable that was a foot longer than the standard because my PlayStation is the longest reach in my setup. And she said, yeah, that's fine. But because I took a recent vacation, like, I guess she has like a certain allocation of orders that are allowed each day because she makes them to order. So if you're looking to buy something, buy it in the morning. But yeah, sometimes there's something at the top that says, you know, on vacation. But yeah, it goes through.
Oh yeah, she's still around.
Yeah, I
it
mean,
happens
she's just
a
a
lot.
one-person
It happens a
operation,
lot.
as far as we know.
Yesterday she had one thing up, it's $185.
yeah, I mean,
That's how much it's going to take for her to
Yeah.
come back from vacation.
yeah,
to
I mean,
make it worth it.
I mean, I remember when I first got the FrameMeister, I had to wait months before I could get a Super Nintendo cable. But but there's other options like Retro Gaming Cables, which is a UK website.
That one seems to have a lot.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, that's a more stable storefront because it is a storefront and not an eBay store, but we kind of like Retro Console Accessories because she's located in the US and is very responsive to like special requests, like in this cable be longer, can I have higher grade shielding and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but
I think she's the only one who has the higher grade shielding, which is
Well,
really important.
Retro cables, like they're doing.
Oh, they are?
They
Okay.
have something called Pack-a-Punch.
It's
Now they're
like,
like doing like a whole nother.
I've not
okay.
used it, but it's
I
like
didn't know that.
really like heavy duty looking. But yeah, and you know, as an aside on the higher grade shielding, if you're using a SCART switcher, I strongly recommend getting a higher grade shielding for your cables because you can get an audio buzz if going through the switcher. So it's definitely something. At first I was like, I'll need that, but I do recommend it if you're using a switcher. If you're not, then it probably doesn't matter.
Excuse me, I have another question for the two gentlemen here. I know that the GameCube component cables are very expensive. Actually, I was lucky enough to get them years ago for $50.
Right.
Were you guys thinking about that anytime down the road as a mobile alternative?
Well, you might want to wait a day. When is your video coming out?
Actually, we meant to say this earlier, but we have another video to show. Could you all hear the previous video well enough? Well, okay. So we'll do the same clunky thing. We were going to show a video clip from our next episode, our next RGB episode, if the right question was asked, and that is more or less the right question.
It's our video daily double.
To set, here,
But
give
they
me
actually
that.
gave us this. I don't know.
Oh wait, is
Did
this
hook-
something?
they
Does this
told-
work?
They
Do
told
we-
us.
do
it-
we
Oh my
plug
gosh.
this
We could
into
try
the-
it.
Do we plug? Where's the audio? Here's the headphone jack.
Just in time.
Here, can we? Let's test. Let's test. I don't hear anything.
Is that the right one?
This is the
I'm
volume.
plugging into the headphone jack.
Is there a line?
No, let's go back.
Yeah.
We wasted enough time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And our panel technically is supposed to be over pretty soon, but no one's scaring us off yet. So anyway, just a little bit of setup for this. This video is not specifically about a component cable alternative, but it is related. There is, I'll fill in the gaps if there's something unexplained. But yes, there will be soon forthcoming component cable alternatives that should be considerably cheaper. This is something that is related to that and is also why our GameCube video didn't come out tomorrow like we hoped it would.
Right. We're still waiting on a
We're
key
still
component.
working out, but here's a clip, and there's an unfinished bit in the clip that you'll see. But this is a clip from the from the upcoming GameCube RGB episode. I don't want to play it in that. I don't even know what that is.
VLC. There you go.
Secret video.
Because the GameCube doesn't encode analog component video internally, it's pretty much impossible to make a simple cable for it. The connector was unique, and the DAC chip is of an application-specific design, which means that to engineer a replacement for it would be challenging to say the least. That's why we've gone for so long without a viable alternative to the official Nintendo cables. But it seems as though the situation has finally changed.
For all their stubbornness, Nintendo was actually ready for digital video a generation before Sony or Microsoft, even if they wouldn't embrace it for another decade. If the GameCube had been on the market for another 5 years, Nintendo might have even made an HDMI cable for it. And that's where the GC Video project comes in, to bring the GameCube's digital capabilities to its ultimate potential that Nintendo stopped short of. In 2014, an engineer going by the name Unseen released his analysis of how the GameCube's digital output works, creating an open source project called GC Video. What this means is that GC Video is not a proprietary creation like the HDMI and RGB mods for NES or N64. Anyone can create and sell their own custom solution based on Unseen's information and firmware. GC Video comes in 2 flavors, digital and analog. The digital version can result in something like a standard HDMI port, for example. The analog version is called GC Video Lite and opens up options for converting the digital signal to component or RGB. Matt Buxton has been one of our biggest allies and sources of information since we started the RGB Masterclass series. And in November 2015, his UK-based website Video Game Perfection became the first to offer GameCube HDMI mods as a widely available service. Tony Moore of Insomniac Games and Club Pixel Perfect let us intercept his HDMI modded GameCube on its way back from the UK. And before we sent it off to him, we had the opportunity to put digital GC Video through its paces. The unit we borrowed uses a standard Pluto 2X FPGA HDMI development board with the GC Video firmware. Supported resolutions are identical to the capabilities of the original digital port, 240p, 480i, 480p, and the equivalent PAL resolutions. Yes, really, 240p over HDMI. And my Samsung HD TV even recognizes it correctly. You might be disappointed that GC Video does not handle upscaling to 720p or 1080p, but we feel that this isn't a huge problem. HD TVs tend to treat 480i and 480p much better than 240p, and you can of course let an external device like the FrameMeister handle scaling and deinterlacing if you prefer. Just like with component cables, native 480p output has to be manually activated when booting compatible games. Holding R, L, X, and Y brings up the GC Video on-screen interface. Settings are much simpler than what you may have seen in our episodes featuring the NES and N64 HDMI mods. The line doubler optionally forces a normally interlaced 480i game to display in de-interlaced 480p. It works pretty well, though the result is perhaps a bit over sharp, revealing jaggies. You might choose to turn off line doubling and let your TV or external scaler handle de-interlacing for a smoother look. But the line doubler's 480p output should in theory result in less lag. As for the system's limited 240p games, the FrameMeister seems to hate receiving 240p over HDMI, so luckily the line doubler got me around this issue. Scan lines in 480p looks a bit inauthentic to me, covering up half the resolution. It's just not something that defined the look of games in the GameCube's generation. Scan lines do work well for the system's very few 240p games, which otherwise look a bit blobby over HDMI. Each resolution saves separate preferences. None of the settings add any input lag. Compared to Component, HDMI is a very similar result. It is, of course, a lossless digital image, but the official Component cables do perform an extremely high-quality analog conversion. It's not so much an upgrade as it is an alternative that uses a more accessible connector. And if you want to see more of the video, you should go to the RetroWare panel tomorrow at 3 o'clock, is that right?
Yep.
We'll
be showing the first 9 minutes of the episode.
Which addresses, and we can explain more now if you have questions, it will address more of why it's such a mess, because the port on the GameCube, the digital port, at first I saw that, I thought, why are they calling it a digital port? Because it's not, that can't be digital video. It is digital video. It's a freaking weird version of digital video, and that's why, oh, we have water here, I just noticed that. It's a really weird version of digital video that only Nintendo had the know-how and a company that they used to make a chip with. Only they knew how to decode that into something that a TV, whether digital or analog, could use. And they thought that, oh, we might make some sort of 3D accessory for the GameCube, so they put this digital port on there that's capable of 480p. I don't know how the 3D would have worked, but at any rate, they never made that, and they just made analog component cables instead. And because it's so difficult to engineer replacement, and like shown in the video, someone reverse engineered it, figured it out in like a year and a half ago, released the information, and anyone can use that information to create their own version, whether it be analog. So there is going to be an analog replacement, and that's, to be honest, what we're waiting for to finish the episode. The guy who was making that alternative was just a little bit behind on his schedule, so we're waiting to receive so we can show the result of that. But so look forward to that. Watch our channel. You know, hopefully in the next 1 to 3 weeks, hopefully we'll have the final version of this episode out, and you'll get to see the wide range of possibilities.
So I think probably the impetus for the question is that the GameCube cable costs a whole lot of money to get now.
Right.
It costs about $200 to $300. $200 would be lucky. It's more like $250 plus.
So do you guys know pricing information on?
I was given some figures, and I haven't really figured out yet how to convey it in the video, but I'll go ahead and say here that what we were told is it's kind of going to vary depending on whether you're more of a do-it-yourselfer or whether you want to receive something completed. Like you saw in that video, the HDMI mod kind of hacks into the backside of the unit, and currently both for digital and analog alternatives, does require a modification to the backside. Like I say, this is open source. Competition is kind of going to change the future of this project, and people are working on, including the person who's going to send us something, working on a more factory finished look for the backside of the console, so it doesn't have that hacked look, as well as the people from Video Game Perfection who are currently doing the mod with them. They're also looking into ways that won't require removing the digital port. Currently, it just has to be that way to fit the board that they're using right now and to fit an HDMI cable into that board. Basically what's going to happen is it's going to put like a Wii component port on the back of the GameCube instead. And in the future, they are going to make, hopefully, a plug-and-play version. They've made a replacement for that port, and they're going to include the technology both for either HDMI or a component alternative that will just go into the port with no modification to the system. Those will be a little more expensive than internal mod, though, because of the cost of recreating that connector. But
It'll be cheaper than.
It'll be a lot cheaper.
cable.
To do the internal mod, if you aren't a do-it-yourselfer, it's hopefully going to be under $100. So it's a big improvement. If you want to install the mod yourself, then the parts of the mod will range from $50 to $70 or something like that. But don't quote me on that. Those aren't hard numbers necessarily just yet. And again, that could change. Competition is going to change the face of this project and stuff like that.
So do you know if, can you put the internal mod into consoles that don't have the ports?
We're told that theoretically it is possible to do it because the signal is still there, and I'm a little skeptical of that myself, I guess, but supposedly it would require more mod work, but we're told that it is theoretically possible to access the digital signals on consoles that don't have the port. And speaking of which, it's been really hard for us to find pictures of the backside of a GameCube that doesn't have the port because everyone we know has an earlier GameCube like we do.
Did you try going downstairs? I'm sure there's plenty of.
There might be. I mean, I have my camera with me. Well, I've got a light and I've got my camera, so maybe I'll get that while we're here.
There's a couple more. You were there with the beard? Or both get a beard.
The 64, I know they have a HDMI solution to that. From what I've heard, that once you put that in there, there is an option to blur it.
Right. So it's not an automatic thing. It's a settings thing. You don't have to do it. In theory, it's really only made for games that have an internal frame buffer of 320 pixels wide. So not all games do that, but most do. And it looks phenomenal. For example, Star Fox 64, I don't know why it doesn't. It has a setting for automatically detecting whether this is a game that will do a good reversal of the blur. Star Fox 64 doesn't automatically detect as one for some reason, but if I force it in the Ultra HDMI settings, it looks fine. But other games do look bad if you force it. But the vast majority of N64 games, it automatically works for, and it looks amazing. It doesn't completely remove anti-aliasing, but it removes that final pass that really blurs the image before it leaves the console. And what's so cool is if you've got an N64 that has the older type of RGB mod that doesn't require like the specialty board that's like, what, $90 or something?
Yeah, that's what I have.
If you have an early N64, you can have just a simple RGB mod. The part costs like, I don't know, $20 or $30. And that port, that RGB mod can coexist with the HDMI mod, and that's what I've got. So I've got my N64 outputting RGB to my PVM and outputting HDMI to my HDTV, and it is glorious. I would say that the N64 HDMI mod is my personal favorite thing that I've run into doing this whole series. Like, this guy hates it. Well, he has to hate N64. I
don't care about the N64.
I was the right age for the N64, so I have a really big soft spot for it. And it's like the coolest thing I've run into because I feel like that is something, that blur reversal is something that shouldn't work, but it does. And you kind of did a little bit of experimentation with some algorithms, didn't you?
Well, I came up with an idea a long time ago about the SNES one-chip thing,
right,
to characterize the if you took like an image that was blurred and wasn't blurred, and this is common in video process. Like me and Nick both did image processing in school, and so you do something called deconvolution, and it's an attempt to, based on a blurred sample and a non-blurred sample, you can find the function that blurred it, and you can undo that function.
Yeah. See, in my mind, is more of a graphics. Yeah, is more of a graphics person. I would just expect that once it's messed up, you couldn't fix it. But yeah, it's amazing. We've got like 5 more minutes, or maybe 2 more. Red there, and then glasses in the back. I can't quite see who you are.
JP21 connector?
Yeah,
Where'd you buy the thing from Solaris?
So are you trying to use the RGB connector that came with the system?
Or with with the FrameMeister? Are you using the input like the? But you got a SCART cable, like.
Do you know if you got a SCART or JP21 cable?
Okay, then
I think that's it.
That's the problem he described earlier.
You need to get a SCART dongle thing that goes into the RGB.
Yeah, so basically go, does retrogamingcables.uk, so go to, you go there and look for a thing that looks exactly like the thing that came with it, and it'll say like XRGB mini adapter for FrameMeister or something, and look for one that says SCART if that's what you want to use, and consistently from now on buy SCART cables for it, just like we've done. Don't buy JP21. Alternatively, you could just buy JP21 cable and use it with the one that came with it. But there are possibly some sync issues with Super Nintendo. Sync on Luma might be your safest bet, depending on what model you have. If you don't know what model you have, but C-Sync should work for most models, except for the very last revision of the big system.
And in the minis, do the minis have?
Minis don't do RGB natively, but presumably you're not using a mini. Is that correct? Yeah. So
yeah, just the one chip O3 is the only
one chip. Yeah. So most likely C-Sync. Look for a cable that says C-Sync. We've got a whole episode on our channel about sync and why that is so stupid and confusing. But so
it's a really good episode. It's fantastic the way they describe the different syncs and combining them.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I always find myself second guessing if we explained it right.
No, we approved it.
But anyway, was that Justin in the back?
Yeah. Hello. I want to know when the madness stops.
It never stops.
Because you're going to want to upgrade something to 4K.
I know.
Yeah.
You're going to slide BNC cables on the shit. Like, you're going to do 3D. You're going to do, like, ultra. Like, when does it stop? When will you...
The phrase we always use.
It's an ongoing battle.
The funny thing about all this is what you say, when do you find fulfillment? You know, the truth is I was actually not unhappy with the setup I had. I had a good setup for getting S-video to my HD TV. I was not unhappy. I was happy. I was happy, but then I saw what you could do, and I'm like, but I want that compulsion to improve it. Which is partly why I don't play many PC games, because then I just waste all my time trying to tweak settings. But that compulsion to improve it, I'm like, oh, I can make it better, and I'm always trying to make it better. But then again, I can plug in composite video and be like, there's a certain nostalgic quality to this crap, you know? But where does it end? We say the rabbit hole goes deep. It probably doesn't ever end, you know? On our first RGB video, I said, my setup is future-proof against, you know, any whatever. And now I'm looking back and thinking it's, you know, it is future-proof in a way, but especially because I'm so deep into this, because we're so involved in making the videos about it, you know, it's not necessarily going to end. We always want to get our hands on opportunities to test new things. And
for me, it's when they started removing S-video from TVs, I threw the gauntlet down, and it's like, that's it. We got to make sure we could do this.
That was a
20,
big thing
30 years from now.
Because I thought S-video looked pretty darn good.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I didn't even care how it looked on HD TV. I thought it looked fine enough. You know, I like the pixel look. I don't necessarily need scan lines. Scan lines are neat, but I don't need them. But I thought S-video looked fine. But I agree with you. When I bought my first LCD HD TV and it didn't have S-video, I'm like, I have a audio receiver that converts S-video and outputs a component, so I didn't even have to worry about it. I thought, well, I'm going to have to use this audio receiver forever, because I'm never going to get another thing that uses S-video. But now I just use I use the FrameMeister, and it's this whole different thing. I thought S-video was as good as it got, but how wrong I was.
For me, the madness probably ends when my wife finds out how much I've spent on this.
Just keep cooking the books, man.
Yeah.
You know, someday we'll be able to say that this paid for itself, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
All right, that's going to do it. Thanks, everybody, for coming.